Switch my social account.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Grid Irn-Cru. This is week 3. We've had it already. I can't believe it, guys. Like it's been such a fast 3 weeks and a stunning start to the season. We've got a few stunning games to talk about with some stunning results, and we also have a few stunning panel members on here with me today. Coming at you first, it's the most handsome man in Hamilton, he of the Chiefs fandom, and the rather lovely room that you have kind of going on there. I haven't seen this in a wee while. It's the one and only Studs. Talk me through your decorations.
How are you doing, mate? Yeah, so managed to finally get my room sorted, got my signed jerseys up, and I've got my, just out of screenshot there, I've got my signed helmets for a couple of Super Bowl wins. I was saying to you before, I need to get one for this year's Super Bowl. I've got a Travis Kelce for the Eagles, I've got Watkins for the previous 49ers one, so I'm thinking I need to get a new one in there soon.
No, definitely. No, it's looking great. That's all I can say. And I can't wait to next time I'm back in Scotland actually come and see this room in the flesh. And maybe have a Bengals thing to it for you.
Nah, I don't know if that'll be welcome, but nah, you'll be welcome. I don't know about the Bengals extra.
Yeah, and then also our next guest, or not even guest, like our next regular contributor to the crew, and absolutely kind of fantastic member. He's been doing such great work on the socials and also our special crew series, which I don't know if anyone's followed that yet, but Gav, why don't you tell us about your most recent episode?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time to be here as I finally get to join the Victory Monday club. It's been a while, but it's good to be there. I enjoy it while it is. But yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks for us. Obviously, get our regular preview crews and review crews every week. Myself and Dan have now had a couple of specials under our belt, mainly focusing on flag football in the last couple of sessions, although we do think the idea for our special crews is really just to talk to individuals around the world of American football, whatever their interest is. And it's more of a sit-down interview discussion type format, which has worked really well. Episode 1, we spoke with Ollie Dyer and Liam Harper from the GB Lions team. And then this past week, we actually had the privilege to speak to Izzy Guerreci, who's a wide receiver for Team USA Women, who came back from the World Championships in Finland with the gold medal, but actually quite a decorated athlete, both in high school and college. Played 5 years of Division 1 NCAA basketball before actually returning to flag football after our college career. So yeah, really fascinating story, not just a pure recap of the tournament that happened a few weeks ago, but actually going back to her past, what inspired her. And yeah, she really speaks from the heart. So full recommendation. Obviously, we put our podcasts out on Spotify and Apple, but this is one where we really do recommend checking out the YouTube stream if you can, because I think you get a lot out of it. So yeah, strong recommendation for me.
Well, fantastic work, Gav. That's absolutely great. In other news, before we get into the games and everything here, the other thing we want to mention is the Stramash podcast. They're having an event this weekend. It's a live watch along. I think that's Dropkick Murphys in Edinburgh, and a few of the crew are going to be there as well. Studs, I don't know if you have any of the background about times and stuff like that. Or how it works.
Yeah, so Stramash have invited us along with I think it's Clearing Oblivious podcast are going to be there as well, with the guys from Stramash. It starts at 4:30 at Dropkick Murphys. Tickets are free, and it's going to be a live kind of watch along of Red Zone, and I dare say there'll be various things happening, various chats with the guys pre-game, and obviously some of the crew will be there to kind of meet up with some of the fans and have a chat with people and get in amongst the community.
That sounds like it'll be a really good time, and we get to kind of, obviously we don't want to step in the preview crew's toes, but I'm guessing we'll get to watch such great games as the Rams and the Bears, or the Bengals and the Panthers. There we go.
There we go. Battle of the big cats.
The return of Dalton, which we will get to soon. So don't you worry. But anyway, going back to the past. Here we go. Let's take that time machine and let's shuffle it back a bit here. We're going all the way back to Thursday night when we had the New England Patriots travelling to MetLife to play against the Aaron Rodgers-led Jets. And now this one, obviously, for years, the New York Jets were kind of getting absolutely pounded by Belichick and Brady and those Patriots that were, basically the proto Chiefs kind of thing. They rolled along with their dynasty type kind of situation with their outstanding quarterback and their great defenses. And they, frankly, they absolutely schooled the Jets for years. And now Aaron Rodgers is with the Jets. The Patriots, they've moved on. They've got they're running with Brissett right now at quarterback. They're kind of looking to develop Drake May. So they're obviously Belichick's gone too. Times have changed, but they'd still be hoping that against the Jets, who have they've looked decent so far, I would say, through weeks 1 and 2, but heading into week 3, they were kind of hoping, we've beat the Bengals, we took the Seahawks to overtime and lost by 3 in the end there. So thinking, maybe we can make this close. Gav, I'll let you talk about your city's other team for a little bit. What did you think about the Jets?
Your noisy neighbours.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a bit of a theme here from this week's podcast from me, which is it's only week 3, but at the same time, it's week 3. And some teams really needed to pick up a gear this week, and others they maybe don't need to worry too much about the odd random result here. I think especially with the shortened pre-season. Maybe actually just speaking of the Patriots first, I think we know, obviously, Stu, we're not going to have you for that week 1 result, but that is starting to look like a bit of an aberration there. And yes, they kind of went to overtime with the Seahawks, but that's another team that I have my question marks about, even sitting at 3-0. So on the Jets, on the other hand, though, this is a team that's starting to roll. That's 2 wins back-to-back. They opened up against the 49ers in week 1. And yet it's a good, comfortable win. So now you're starting to think, yep, got a nice start to the season, especially after the way last year went. 24-3, quite a one-sided affair, really. And I think the way things are developing, Jets looking like the main contenders to the Bills for that division.
Yep, no, definitely. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because obviously with the Dolphins, who we'll get to later on as well, they've had their injury issues, and now they have quarterback issues as a result of that. So we'll see how they kind of progress along the way. Studs, speaking of quarterback play though, what do you think of Mr. Rodgers so far?
He's probably one of the most irritating guys in the NFL. Let's be brutally honest, but you can't take away what he can do as a quarterback, and it just goes to show, certainly for the Jets in particular, having even semi-competent quarterback play, what it's going to do for that team. They've got an elite defense. We've known that for years. They've now got one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and they're kind of starting to sort of piece it all together, as Gav said. So I think obviously the relationship between Rodgers and Lazard is huge. It's coming for Green Bay. He's still obviously working in that with Garrett Wilson, but you did see glimpses of it. I think there was a big third down play where he found Garrett Wilson to convert on that one as well, and it just goes to show that there's flashes there. Mm-hmm. If they can develop that relationship, then I think the Jets are certainly going to be one of the teams to watch.
Yeah, I also think just I've seen Mike Williams increase his snaps week over week, and actually now he's getting targeted as well. That's from a Jets fan perspective, you must be pretty happy when he's chucking the ball to Garrett Wilson. Yeah, connection might not be there, like you say, but he's starting to use those weapons. Just briefly before we move on, I don't know if either of you actually watched it, but what did you make of Drake May? If you did, if you didn't, I can talk a little bit on it quickly.
For me, I thought, again, similar to what I said about the Wilson-Rodgers connection, I think May showed flashes when he came into the game, so it was good to kind of see him get get some time on in a real live situation rather than pre-season, because we all know pre-season's against the second string. The fact that he was able to take the Jets down, the Patriots, down the field, in such a kind of concise manner and piece those bits together, I think the Patriots probably doing things the right way. They've got Jacoby Brissett there as their bridge quarterback. They can bring me in games like this where they're getting blown out. They can start to drip feed me in and give them some time on the field, get them used to running at game speed. I think it's all going to benefit the Patriots in years to come.
Yep. So Studs, I think you could say that's possibly a good way to develop a young quarterback. And on that note, we're going to move on to game 2. So the Bears versus the Colts, which features 2 highly thought of, promising young quarterbacks. Gav, did you watch this one, and what did you make of the plays of both Mr. Williams and Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, well, I think the result probably lends itself to who came out better overall in the course of the game. I think that, we kind of talked a little bit about Drake May there, and I think there is a big thing to be said in terms of, yes, there's the hype, but let's not read too much into people earlier on in their careers. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I will say is the fighting over the ball thing, that felt a wee bit daft to me. Like, it's, I mean, you had the Odunze and Caleb Williams obviously having a wee semi-serious scrap for the football after they both scored their first touchdown. It's a great moment, but also priorities, guys. You lost the game, so let's focus on what really matters. That, to me, you want to think just a learning experience that they're going to grow up from that. So I think for me, obviously, Williams is the guy who's probably come in with the greatest fanfare, being the number 1 overall pick. However, Richardson, obviously, this is technically his rookie year. He was out injured for most of his true rookie season. And I think, there's some real positive signs with him. The guy can really run and quite happy to initiate contact. But he can also fire that ball down the field when he has to. Alec Pierce, maybe not quite as active as he's been in the first couple of weeks, but we're also seeing Josh Downs is starting to get back into the setup with the Colts. And I think obviously he's another one coming back from injury, but Richardson's got a few options to play with in that offense. And I think that's going to be an exciting one for them. Bears story, it's about the defense. I think you talk about all the pieces you put around a young quarterback. Yes, they have tooled up with free agents. They've tooled up with Odunze. But as we saw, particularly in week 1 against Will Levis and his disaster for the Titans, the Bears have a defense that can keep the Bears and Caleb in the game. He is going to have to do something, but he's not going to have to do it all on his own.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say just quickly looking at the stats for the quarterbacks there, Anthony Richardson, he only attempted 20 passes, completed 167 yards and threw 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Still gets the win. Caleb Williams, on the other hand, 52 attempts, 33 completions, so 363 yards passing. Well, that's his most in a game by far. And I tell you what, like a couple of them were absolute dart passes, huge balls. So he ended up with 2 touchdowns, but he did end up with 2 interceptions. That was the thing. It was like, for those amazing passes, he then would, there was one where I think it was literally back-to-back plays. He had it was I forget the exact yardage, but it was like a 40 or 50 yard play to Odunze. Like completely right on the money, right in the basket, like absolutely great pass. And then he immediately turns around, next play, next snap, throws it straight back to the other team. Yeah. I think it's like just all your hard work, you've just thrown it away kind of there by, and that's the rookie thing. And I will say though, like for me, just looking at those 2, I do think you maybe have to feel slightly better if you're the Bears, like about how your quarterback's looking at this moment in time. But the thing for the Colts is their defense is pretty good, but they do have Jonathan Taylor as well. So they, their run game, 110 yards from Jonathan Taylor, 2 touchdowns, and then another touchdown from Trey Sermon as well. So
that's something we do want to kind of pull on as a thread, because actually you're right, the Colts did fantastically on the ground, but I think when we look at Caleb's stats and how he did, he had to throw the ball 52 times. And actually, when you check down those rushing stats, you can start to see why. Rashawn Johnson's the leading rusher for the Bears with 30 yards. There's multiple players there, none of them getting over 4 yards a carry. So I think it's probably not so much a criticism of Caleb himself, but I think the way the game played out, and that's a credit to the Colts' run defense, that they really had to go to the air.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where the Colts' run defense was the week before against the Packers when they knew the Packers was going to run. But again, for me, it goes back to with the Bears, the fear is you don't want your rookie quarterback thrown 52 times. If your rushing attack isn't getting anywhere, that then brings up the question about the whole line, because DeAndre Swift, who they paid in the summer, he's a decent running back if you give him a good O-line, and you've seen that in Philadelphia last year. But the Bears O-line's just horrific just now. I mean, you're seeing Caleb running for his life as well, and the fact that he gets 300 plus yards out of that O-line is a miracle for me.
Matt Stafford-esque studs.
Yes.
With bad O-lines and huge yardage, but no, I mean, obviously it ended the way it ended. Colts have picked up a win, despite their quarterback not really throwing the ball that much or doing anything, but whatever, a win's a win. I would love one for the Bengals. We don't have one yet.
What about Latu's forced fumble? That was ridiculous as well.
Fantastic.
That was superb. So
nice
that definitely deserves a shout out.
Yeah, he was one of my most highly thought of players going into the draft this year. So I'm pleased to see him do that, especially with the injuries and everything he's came back from. But going for one, or just talking about defence there, and moving on to two teams, defensive stalwarts, great defensive coaches, well-organised coaches, the Chargers versus the Steelers. And this was Harbaugh coming up against, finally, a fairly well-coached team. And do we now need to start talking about Fields and the Steelers being legit? They're kings of the north as it stands for now. Do you know?
I genuinely don't think we need to talk about the Steelers and Chargers game in great detail. Unless you were a Steelers or Chargers fan, I really don't think anybody was watching that game. To be perfectly honest, listen, the Steelers defense, we know exactly what they're all about. They've got TJ Watt, and if you want to have any sort of success, and again, we're going to have to figure it out on Christmas Day, you're going to need to stop TJ Watt, because everything just runs right through him for the Steelers. And when they've got that defense, you're not going to have to ask Fields to do a lot on that front. And don't get me wrong, looking at his stats, he did actually have a pretty decent day, Fields, to be honest. Probably his best day as a Steeler, quite frankly.
Did you say he had a day?
A Fields day. Nice.
Love it, Gav, but I mean, yeah, so just looking at it though quickly, I know what you mean. It wasn't the most exciting game in the entire world, which is exactly what we all predicted before it. Yeah. But I think, Gav, just the one thing that the Steelers did really well was, they protected that, or they did very well against the rush, which Harbaugh's teams are known for that. And J.K. Dobbins, who studs, has been trying to ship to everybody in our fantasy league, thinking he's getting a top tier wide receiver for him, but we're all waiting for his ACL to go, or his MCL or something, because that's what happens to Dobbins every year. But Gav, what did you think of that run defense for the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see just looking at the stats. I mean, it really was staunch. I mean, I think other than one carry from Darius Davis for the Chargers, again, the two main backs in that team, Edwards and Dobbins, 3 yards and under per carry. So they're absolutely getting stuffed up. I think one of the factors that we do want to talk about in this one is the fact that Justin Herbert had to leave early to an injury. Although I guess in terms of talking about that Steelers defense as a whole, we probably do want to, I don't want to say credit them for taking Herbert out of the game, but they were pressuring him 40% of his dropbacks. So they were getting after him. It wasn't just a fortuitous injury that Herbert had. He was getting pressures and getting hit all day long.
Yeah, I guess that is one to look out for, because I mean it's one of those things where I know with Burrow, he's had some injuries in the past, like ankle injuries. Studs, you know all about Mahomes with a high ankle sprain, but he managed to kind of roll right on through it and win a Super Bowl. But for the Chargers, though, you do have to think maybe I know they played him this week, but you do wonder if they're maybe a little more careful going forward, and they'll look at this season as well. You know what? Let's just maybe give them a bit of time, and we'll still, it's a division where you could probably rack up somewhat. You're not winning it, Chiefs are winning it, but you could maybe rack up enough wins to challenge for a wild card spot. So why risk Herbert's entire year when you could maybe give him a few weeks rest?
Well, I think that's it. The news coming out today is that he's re-aggravated the high ankle sprain that he had in the summer. So you're going to have an element of protection on that front. And with their backup, they've got Taylor Heineke, who, let's face it, behind the Commanders O-line is used to taking hits without being brutal about it. So he's putting him in against the Steelers. It really wouldn't have been anything new for him if the Steelers were getting after him, so he would have been used to running for his life and trying to escape the pressure.
100%. So speaking of running, we're moving on to the next game where there was an absolute boatload of rushing yards. So the Eagles versus the Saints. This one finished 15-12, and obviously, we can't talk about it without talking about Saquon Barkley. He put up 147 yards rushing. Obviously, what he did put up 65 yards, and it was in one attempt, kind of thing as well. But that's still 147 yards. If you're pushing a $150 in a game and scoring 2 touchdowns, you're doing something right. So, Gav, you know all about this man. I'll let you lead off and talk about this.
I mean, there's a bit of a theme for me. I think even in a week where it's Victory Monday for me, I'm still getting constant reminders of what we've lost out on. Xavier McKinney also for the Packers getting his 3rd straight game with a pick. But I mean, on Barkley, I've always said before that I think it probably was the right decision to let him go. As much as a division rival, I am happy to see him doing well as a player. And he got a lot of criticism for his drop in the Falcons game last week. I think, yes, he is meant to be one of your elite players, but I think what we've seen through 3 weeks now is that actually the Eagles now live and die by Saquon Barkley. He carried them in Brazil. People will blame him for the drop, even though there's a number of other reasons why they lost that game to the Falcons. And again, he's the one that's pulled them through in a tricky game on the road against the Saints team, who are very much flowing with confidence at the moment.
Yeah, no, I definitely I would agree with that. And my other favourite fact about this, Studs, is the fact that it was 3-0 to the Saints up until the 4th quarter. It was an absolute great defensive showing by both teams just to kind of hold each other out there, and then the floodgates kind of opened a bit with the Eagles putting up 15 points and the Saints scoring 9 from field goals in the 4th quarter there. But if you're the Saints though, Studs, what would you take away from what you saw?
I think you take away the fact that your defence is playing absolutely lights out. I called it on the review show that I didn't think this would be a high scoring game. I think I was the only one that said it'd be a low scoring game out of the panel that night. So I just had an inkling that the Eagles' defence over the last few years has been good. There's no getting away from it, and they've been building up using all those Georgia Bulldogs, and they've been building on that side of things. The Saints' defence over the last few years has probably been pretty underrated because of how bad their offence has been under Dennis Allen. So for that aspect, you knew it was 2 good defences coming against each other. So yeah, I think if you're the Saints, you take out the positives for the defensive side. You held a team that's got the say, albeit they're missing AJ Brown, but they still had. When you look at Dallas Goedert, 170 yards. Jalen Hurts had 311 yards, so he was still moving the ball. It was the prototypical bend, don't break. So the Eagles were still getting in the red zone, especially in the kind of 4th quarter side of things, where obviously tiredness is starting to take a factor, but they didn't break. They didn't really. They held them for as long as they possibly could until those 2 Saquon Barkley touchdowns late on.
Yeah, well, they gave them a chance. Jalen Carter, before we move on here, I just want to say he kind of stood out. It was sort of like an emergent game for him, kind of thing. So.
I thought you were meaning they stood out for his chirping at the Saints fans. It's been all over Twitter.
It's
They
nice
had to get restrained.
Yeah.
Well, for this game is, I guess there's been a lot of excitement around the Saints in the first 2 weeks, and there's maybe, I mean, certainly not any reason to panic losing by 3 points in week 3, but maybe just a slight reality check with this game. I mean, they did beat the Panthers quite handsomely. They stomped Dallas, who I think we've seen are a better team, but have their deficiencies as well. And this is a situation where you're playing against a team that's good, not great. They were in contention, but ultimately they couldn't close that game out. There's a long way to go. Can they build on that? But yeah, obviously, if you're stomping the Panthers, that's probably, we're going to need to see a little bit more before we put some money in the States.
Before you give Dennis Allen a new contract.
That too.
Yeah, we'll get to the Panthers in a bit though. We're not quite there yet. But.
Just one more shout out for Dan, who said Honey Badger was past it. I think that's now back-to-back weeks with an interception for him. So he's definitely not past it.
This is what I love on the crew though, is when we're all kind of coming out with our hot takes, and it always backfires on you, like when you see things like that. But yeah, maybe don't count the Honey Badger out yet. Anyway, let's pack our bags and head off to the next game, which is Green Bay Packers versus the Tennessee Titans. So this one you had Malik Willis in for his second game, going up against Will Levis and his Tennessee Titans, and this one went probably exactly the way we all thought, and Malik Willis looked like an absolute all-star. So Gav, your thoughts on Malik Willis?
Well, I think that the Packers fans are finding that there is indeed life after love. We kind of saw after the injury that there was reason not to panic with the Packers. When you looked at the schedule, I mean, the Colts maybe we thought could be a tricky one for them. They handled it. Titans, I think we knew was going to be a bit more of a straightforward game. And the remaining sort of 3-4 weeks until Love's expected back, you know, they've got opposition where they shouldn't be asking Malik Willis to do too much. Having said that, what he did do, you know, he delivered. And if you look at his stat line, he protected the football, you know, 13 of 19 for 202 and a touchdown. Crucially, no interceptions. He's also getting another one on the ground. You know, that's against, you know, these games like the Titans. It's just, you know, don't do anything daft, don't mess it up. And he did his job. And, you know, the Packers look like a team that they've got the pieces there that they will be in contention when Jordan Love does come back.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where, like, looking at him there, because he's got a QBR 128.73 from this game. Well, sure, he's not throwing it that much, but what he did throw, like you say, it was good. And then he's 6 attempts for 73 yards rushing. That's an average of 12.2, just about. And 29 was his longest one. So he was definitely able to move the ball with his feet when he had to. He looked good. On the other side, Studs, what do you make of the Titans' complete lack of a run game?
I think it was probably surprising because Pollard had looked good the week before in the rushing attack for them. So everybody was, I think he was quite a lot of fantasy stream options this week for people, but they just couldn't get anything going at all. So they were then asking Levis to kind of do it all, and we've now got we've got this season, the first 3 weeks of this season where he just seems to have that moment of a total brain fart, where he just has an absolute mess. And again, it reared its head in the first half of this game where he threw the pick 6 to Jair Alexander, and a pass that just never looked as if it was available to him. So he really needs to cut out these mistakes big time, or we're going to see more of Brian Callahan tearing him a new one on the sidelines.
No, for sure. Ex-Bengals, Brian Callahan, of course. I would say, like, on the plus side for the Titans, though, like, you know, look at D-Hop, he had 6 receptions, 73 yards. and a touchdown as well.
His touchdown was nice as well. It looked like vintage Hopkins, to be honest.
Yeah, I think D-Hop's still got it, kind of thing. So I do wonder, the longer this goes on with the Titans, if once they start dropping out of the race, I wonder if somebody starts, maybe someone comes in with an offer for D-Hop and we see him moving on for other clients in terms of playoffs, because he's also not getting any younger. So guy may want to win. He's made his money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously that one ended Packers 30, Titans 14, which again, even with Malik Willis in, I think that's pretty much what we expected. Maybe a bit closer score-wise, but a couple of scores in it in the end. Now,
we just before we jump on as well, we had need to give a shout out to the Irish punter for the Packers as well, who hit a absolute monster 63-yard punt. So it's always good to see the guys for this side of the pod kind of doing well. Yeah, so yeah, well done to Daniel Whelan. Daniel Whelan.
Whelan, yeah.
I think he actually nailed one. I think it might be that 63-yarder. He got downed in the 5 as well. So yeah, nice bit of action there.
Yeah, Daniel Whelan. That's the name.
Daniel Whelan.
But yeah, so moving on from one game where the score was a couple of scores more than what we all expected to be, like in terms of the point differential. Moving on to the Vikings versus the Texans. The much thought of Texans, the Grid Irn-Cru endorsed, CJ Stroud led Houston Texans, who we've all been looking at saying, you know what, they might be a team that can challenge the Chiefs to knock them off the top of that AFC throne kind of thing if things all break for them. But who did they run into? Mr. MVP, Mr. Bradford. Sam and the Vikings are there again. So Gav, you've maybe seen a bit of Bradford, with him being a city rival quarterback and all that. Like, what do you think of what you've seen so far and what you saw this weekend?
Yeah, I think I think what we're starting to see is that the Minnesota is a team that we were far too fast to write off. A lot of times we talk about quarterbacks that don't find the right environment for them, and obviously, in terms of thrown with Bradford, Mr. Darnold, Sam Darnold.
Oh, yeah, I said Bradford. Sorry, that's a bad.
But I think Darnold is a guy who came into the league with a great deal of fanfare, and if you look at the teams that he started out with, he went to the Jets, who, yes, they're turning it around at last. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL for pretty much a decade, along with us. But then he follows that up by going to Carolina, where, well, we all know what's happened in Carolina. So the guy, yes, he gets paid to do a job, but he's not had the greatest of supporting casts. Goes to San Francisco, gets a chance maybe to learn and develop in a more positive environment, not asked to do too much. And then now he finds himself in Minnesota, where actually he has the best receiver, sorry, Stu, in the league to throw to in Justin Jefferson. And he's got a defense that's supporting along the way. So all of a sudden, after 6 years now, this is finally finding a home where actually, if you're JJ McCarthy, you're actually a little bit worried that, he's got a competitor who's doing a pretty solid job and is still pretty young to boot. So I think from the Vikings perspective, they look like they could be potentially even a contender for the division. I get the feeling this is a team that you're going to run into in the wild card round, and you could take them seriously, but maybe beyond that, not so much. But yeah, I think if there's any team's stock that's shot up so far in 3 weeks, it's the Vikings. Texans, on the other hand, I'm going to say that this is not a good result for them. However, again, week 3, they're on the road. They're still 2-1. There's plenty of time. Just write it off, move on. Let's see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But I think the Vikings are a lot better than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, Studs, kind of one thing I would say there as well, just on the continuing the Sam Darnold thing a little bit, is do we think he can only do it against defensive coaches and head coaches that have came out of the Niners system, because obviously the Niners he schooled last week. He's been there. He's been the quarterback. He's been sitting there for a year learning it all. Then this week he goes up against the Marco Ryans and the Texans, who do play quite a Niners heavy style, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe he just knows how to, maybe Darnold knows how to just pick those teams apart. So I can't remember who they're playing next week, but I guess that's talking point for the preview crew. But no, what I was going to ask you though is, on the Texans side, should they be worried by this result?
No, again, I'm with Gav, and I kind of say that at the Top Golf event when Dallas were getting their asses handed to them of the Saints. It's very, very early in the season. You look at the talent that's in that Texans team on both sides of the ball. I think they're going to be fine. I don't think their division's the greatest, and I think you're seeing that with the results with the Titans. The Jags, who obviously play tonight, we'll see a bit more about them, but they're 0-2 so far as well. And of course, as I say, I don't think it's a great division, so I think they should be fine.
Studs, yeah, just quickly on that, this was something I wanted to kind of point out at some point tonight, so now is the perfect time. The AFC South, there is not one team in this division that has a positive point differential. I think even the Texans are at -19, largely thanks to the Vikings in that last game there. But yeah, there's not another division in the entire league that doesn't have at least one team on positive points. The only other division that has, that basically only has one team on positive points, that's the NFC East, and it's the Eagles, I think. So even the Giants, they're similar, they're -19. So there you go, you're just as good as the Texans, Gav.
Well, it's cause for optimism, and we have Dallas next week, so
yeah, exactly. Time for optimism. Anyway, that's enough Texans and Vikings, and we get to move on to probably the game of the week. The most fantastic viewing for me. I really enjoyed it. The New York Giants versus Brian's mighty Cleveland Browns. Should the Cleveland Browns fans be rioting in the streets yet? Studs, what do you think of the Cleveland Browns?
They're just such a frustrating team. To be honest, you look at them against Dallas, where they were again. Dallas obviously being a recurring team against teams that are winning, but they looked good against Dallas. They obviously got the win last week, and then they come out and they just pretty much laid an egg. They couldn't get anything going. Whether that's down to Deshaun Watson, I don't know. Myles Garrett wasn't 100% healthy. He's talking about he maybe needs a procedure, but he's going to play through the pain barrier. So again, for me, that's a red flag if you're an offensive coordinator, and the fact that, well, he's not fully fit, so can we exploit that? Can we take advantage of it? Because if you're not getting 100% of Myles Garrett, then you've got a chance to expose that defense. And it just looks like that was it for me. Amari Cooper's another one. He seems off colour so far. Maybe the connection's not there with Watson.
That was probably his best game, I think.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's
hard. That's the thing. That's the other side to that coin. But I was actually pleasantly surprised with Cooper's production from my team this week. But,
yeah, well, he's probably the one bright spot to kind of take away. But as you say, it wouldn't have been hard for him to have a positive outlook this week compared to his previous 2 weeks. So maybe the relationship with Watson is coming along, and we've seen signs of that at the weekend. I don't know, but I just kind of wonder how long it's going to be before you see Cleveland Browns fans asking for Jameis Winston to get put in there instead of Watson.
Yep, no, for sure. But speaking of bright spots, Gav, this is your moment. Let's hear what you've got to say.
I'm just going to say it's funny that Brian, who's pretty much glued to the host chair and review crew, he's here. He's not. It's funny that, but no, I think that there's quite a few points to pick up on. I'll maybe actually start with the slightly less obvious one, which is actually the Giants' defense. I had identified particularly Dexter Lawrence before the season to be the guy to crush it, and we needed him to crush it, and crush it he did. He had 2 2 sacks, but more to that point, the entire unit had 8 sacks on Deshaun Watson. The Browns were 28% in third down conversion. Granted, the Giants were as well, but at least, from my point of view, they're getting the other team off the field and keeping them, out of scoring range, which has been a bit of a theme. They had a good first half against the Vikings, who we've already said are doing a lot better than we thought they would. The Skins, yes, we lost that game, but they never found the end zone in that game. And now against the Browns, it's been a really solid performance. I do think the Deontay Banks, he did get caught out a little bit on the touchdown for Cooper. For me, that's a very easy, quick slant that he's catching. At that level, you've got to take away the inside. A good receiver, good quarterback should find you outside, but it's still more difficult to throw over a guy's head than to throw it underneath. So that was probably the one dare point for me. But
hey, Gav, I would say I love the fact you led. We talked about the defence, and you didn't immediately go to wide receivers and quarterbacks. Speaking of good wide receivers,
the obvious bright spot.
So I think we are definitely seeing potentially another Odell Beckham situation here. Hopefully without the attitude this time, but I think in terms of just a rookie that's coming from LSU, no less, making some spectacular grabs. I think he had one of the 2 plays from the weekend. The other one got onto, which you would be expecting is going to be showing up, and you got lost. And that's not even before we get on to his 2 touchdowns. One of them in particular, where he just had the awareness to get both his feet down seconds before his hand hits the whitewash. It's superb. His body's twisting. And funnily enough, making those OBJ comparisons next. We've got Dallas next week. Of course, I still remember we lost that game, so don't. I'm fully aware of that.
Looking at the standings, so Gav, this is a huge game for you next week. So obviously, depending on how the game goes tonight with the Bengals and the Commanders as well. If the Bengals win it, I'm not going to say we will, because all bets are off for me now after the first 2 games this season. But for you, if they do lose, you're going to have 3 teams sitting 1 and 2. So if you were to beat the Cowboys, you'd be, in theory, at least second in the division. And if the Eagles lose, I don't know how the head-to-heads go down, but
that was my. I'm not going to call it a hot take, but if we're going on the Nando's scale, it was probably kind of a medium take. I would say that the Giants are going to tie for first place in the division by the end of week 3, and obviously the Eagles just managed to pull it off in the end, but not far off. And I think you'll probably get yourself out of the Owen club, Stu.
We'll see, but that's the thing, is I guess LSU connection though between the teams. It's like they seem to be good at producing wide receivers, obviously with Neighbours, Chase, Jefferson, even Brian Thomas, who will actually they're not playing till tonight either.
No, tonight.
LSU, yeah, great school for receivers.
So, but no, that's like the G-men. I think you have to be happy with that result. One other bit of news there you kind of touched on it there, Studge, just with how bad the O line's been. They're obviously suffering with injuries, but I saw this morning Wyatt Taylor. It looks like he's going to be landing on IR, so that's him out for at least 4 or 5 weeks, kind of thing, or I think maybe 4 weeks and then plus the bye. It's how it lands, kind of thing. You'll end up out. That's why they're saying maybe put him in the IR for that time. For a team that's famous for being very analytics driven, I would really love to know what analytics they're looking at that says Deshaun Watson should still be their starting quarterback. Any thoughts on that, Spence?
I genuinely think if you offered some Browns fans Flacco ahead of Watson at the start of the season, they would have bit your hand off based on what Flacco did in their run to the playoffs last year. And I think Winston obviously being the backup there as well, you've got an NFL ready backup there. Yes, he's going to take risks. We know that. But he's a highlight every week. You're going to get touchdowns. Yes, you're going to get takeaways. But It's
Flacco
going to be
was-
more productive.
That's the thing, is like Flacco was the same, and they made it to the, that's the thing, is like Flacco turned them around and took them to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Last year, like, sure, they couldn't get it done once they got there, but Winston is also a gunslinger, as you say. So Browns, if you're listening, keep playing Watson.
And who doesn't want to see Jameis eating W's before a game again? Those pre-game speeches are brilliant.
But anyway, enough of the Browns. G-Men, well done though, Gav. Like, I have to say, that was absolutely fantastic. And now let's move on to another game that is probably, to me, the only person that called this the way it went was Keith. So Keith, you get to take a bow from afar here. The Broncos versus the Buccaneers, and the Denver Broncos come out 26-7 winners. Somehow Keith knew that the Broncos were going to win this, even though the rest of us were all drinking the Baker Kool-Aid kind of thing by this point. And we all thought, you know what, there's nothing that can go wrong here. So much so that I started them in multiple leagues ahead of maybe possibly better options, because I thought, it's Baker. He's playing the Broncos. Like, there's no way he isn't balling out, like, going for it kind of thing. So anyway, here we are, like 26-7. Studs, you obviously see a lot of the Broncos when I'm being division mates. What is your takeaways from this, and how terrified are you?
Again, I think the Broncos' defense is probably one of the big talking points for this one. They had their takeaways in this one against Baker, which were the obvious big turning points. I think the Bucks were pretty beat up, and that was something we did touch on in the preview crew, was how that was going to impact them. I think when you're missing people Vita Vea, Anton Winfield Jr. in that defense, that's they're obvious key members of that defense, which has been so good for the past few years. So, but credit to the Broncos, they took advantage of it. Bo Nix actually looked like an NFL quarterback. We've seen him using his legs as well in extending a couple of plays, and got a touchdown out of it as well. Yeah, so it was. And again, the one other takeaway that I remember seeing in the highlights was the Bucks defender try to tackle Jaleel McLaughlin on his touchdown. I think he's still running out the stadium now on that wee kind of jump cut for McLaughlin. So credit to the Broncos. They looked good this week. I think the Bucks looked absolutely horrendous. Baker's pick for the Mike Evans pass was, again, throwing it into double coverage just isn't going to end well, ever. I don't care how good Mike Evans is.
There's having faith in your guy and
stupidity.
Hoping is the polite way of putting it. Gav, like, on the Bucks side, like, what do you think of the potential sea change in that running back order? It's something that we've been hinting at on the podcast, or I know I've kind of mentioned a few times, even in the preseason. I wasn't sure that Rashad White, or how long he was going to be the RB1 there, and Mr. Irving, he had a fairly good game, even in a defeat. What did you make of him in the run?
He did, yeah. I mean, I think to come in and be averaging almost 8 yards a carry, in a game that you're losing quite heavily, it has to be said, that's going to have to be a positive. And one thing that, kind of going through the box score that really stands out in terms of the difference between the two sides, because if you just kind of pour over the stats, it can look like quite a close game in a lot of ways. But the one that really jumped out to me is there was 7 sacks on Baker Mayfield, whereas Bo Nix was protected the whole game. He came out with a clean shirt. And one of the ways that you can obviously help to take that pressure off of Baker is just to reestablish the run game. Personally, we've talked about how it's early in the season. For me, the Bucks, I think they're going to be fine. That's my point of view. Week 3, it's about who needs it more. We've got a team that's sitting at 2-0. We've got a team that maybe has lower expectations, but they're still 0-2 and got something to prove, and probably nothing to lose either. Being on the road in Tampa, and they come away with a strong win. I think it's a great showing for the Broncos. But again, we're looking at some of these Survivor League busting results this week. If I'm a Bucks fan, big picture, I'm not worried yet. I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. But
I think on the Rashad White side of things, the receiving game's always been his strength. Even last year, when you look at it, most of his numbers came in the receiving game rather than the actual rushing side of things. So it could be that they move to a 1-2 punch and Irvine takes the first and second downs, White's the third down back, that type of thing. But yeah, I think Irvine certainly over the last 2 weeks has established himself as a more explosive runner in the rushing game for them.
Yep, no, for sure. On that note, rushing ahead here to the Seahawks versus the Dolphins. This one we probably don't need to spend all that too long discussing, because the Dolphins, we know where they are right now without Tua. But I mean, I guess on that though, Studs, what are your thoughts on the Miami Dolphins?
I think they need to trade for a quarterback, or they need to pick up a free agent quick. Skylar Murray left with a chest injury, I think it was. Skylar Thompson, sorry. So I should know that he's a ex-Kansas State Wildcat. So yeah, he left the game, and you were left with Tim Boyle, who, again, no disrespect to Tim Boyle, he's a total journeyman in the league. He's been around as many teams probably as Ryan Fitzpatrick at this stage. So yeah, the Dolphins just can't seem to get anything going at all. So I think for me the biggest thing is you've got the weapons, you've got A-Chain, you've got Hill, you've got Waddle, you've got OBJ still to come back as well on that side of things. You need somebody that can actually get the ball to them. But that, again, their defence is just horrendous. And I mentioned it in the preview crew, they didn't replace Wilkins, and I think they're really suffering for that now.
No, for sure. Gav, on the Seahawks side, like, this was kind of a just roll it out and business as usual for them, wasn't it? Like, you know, without really having a solid quarterback to play against, they just kind of had to do their thing, and they did.
So there's two ways of looking at this, isn't there? There's the old cliche, you can only play what's in front of you, and the Seahawks took care of business. DK Metcalf, I mean, Geno Smith threw an absolute laser to him for one of the Seahawks touchdowns. It's a good result, but I'm going to say, I'm sorry to Keith and Seahawks fans out there, but you might be 3-0, but it's a name only. Play a real team. Let's see how you're doing week 6, week 7.
Yeah, I mean, like you say with Geno, he threw a touchdown, but he also threw 2 interceptions as well. So, even though you're playing against the Dolphins who have no quarterback, their defense is still pretty solid, and that's another thing that's really a shame for them. Or what I find it's a shame for them is, like, right now they are on that verge of being maybe not like Super Bowl contenders, but if things break right for them and other teams get injuries instead of them, maybe they are Super Bowl contenders. But right now it's.
For me, they've got the lead right now, but that's a tricky division. And if you want to just kind of hit them off one by one, week 1, they play a transitional Broncos side, rookie quarterback at home. Week 2, they play the Patriots, who, yes, they'd won the week before, but I think we're starting to see a reverting to type already. And then obviously week 3, here we've got the Seahawks playing against at QB2, and by the end of QB3, we probably need to see more from them before we can say if they're for real or not this season.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that kind of thing. Now, speaking of people that are real, he's back. He's playing in the league again. Bryce Young was sat, and Andy Dalton, like a Bengals legend and hero, like I love the guy. It was sad to see him go, but understood that was the way it had to go, considering we were getting Joe Burrow. Dalton, he's kind of bounced around a little bit here, and now he's landed with the Panthers, and he's been there the last couple of years. Both games he's played for them, he's been absolutely fantastic. So, I mean, this one up against the Raiders, with Gardner Minshew, and the Panthers come out ahead 36-22. And Dalton, he absolutely balled out, didn't he, Studs?
Yeah, never mind the red rifle. It was the red rocket with some of those throws he was chucking about his pass, and I mentioned that in our group chat earlier. The old OAP pass to Adam Thielen, where he dislocated his hip on the landing. I know it was an absolute rocket. It was thrown with such venom. that nobody was catching it other than his receiver. It was an unbelievable play. I fully expect that to be on our Crew missile of the week, and I'll be disappointed if it isn't. But Andy Dalton just absolutely balled out. He done it. I think his last start. I think he's done it. He was with the Cowboys, and I think he stepped in for a game with the Cowboys, and he threw for like 300 plus yards as well, and led them a victory in that one as well. And then obviously he's done this with the Panthers. Last season he balled out for the Panthers as well. I'd be lying if I was to say they won or lost. But he is a good QB. There's no getting away from it and what he's done in the league. I think they're in good hands just now, and I think they're going to be. I'm not going to say they're going to win a whole load of games, but they're going to be competitive now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting. Carolina at the start of the year was maybe they can pick up games, a few wins against the teams like the Raiders and that, which is, this is what you want to see them doing. Like, it's finally stepping in a positive direction. But yeah, it was interesting just having Andy Dalton in there because there was less of that hesitation. Or that's what it looked like to me from Bryce Young. All of a sudden, you've got the passing games rolling because Dalton just knows, like, just get the ball to where it needs to go, do your reads. That guy's open, it's going there. And then at the same time, because you have a guy that can pass the ball, all of a sudden the defence can't just stat the box and go, let's just go quarterback hunting, or if they hand it off to a running back, we're just going to squash them at the line of scrimmage. She ended up with Mr. Local, to me, Chuba Hubbard.
Chuba.
I always talk about him, so I need to do it here, the Chuba train, the Chuba chop as well. So he, 114 yards on 21 carries, like averaged 5.429 yards a carry as well. So it's pretty decent. Miles Sanders still averaging below 3 yards a carry, but you know what? Touchdown. So the Carolina Panthers, the running game is back, as is the passing, 319 yards. Whole whack of guys getting receptions. Deontay Johnson, 122 yards on 8 receptions. So a touchdown. Obviously, Thielen, you spoke about the hip breaker, and then Chuba getting his passing touchdown as well in there. So yeah, no, Panthers look pretty decent. Gav, just quickly on the Raiders, like, how did you feel about what you saw from them? Should the fans be concerned after they all seemed pretty happy last week? Or?
Yeah, so I think I'm glad you actually kind of went through and reeled off all the positive points about the Panthers, Stu, because they've got their win and they firmly deserve it. They've done all the right things. They made the change at QB, and it's a well-deserved win. However, that final score has a lot more gloss on it even from the Raiders' perspective. This was 32-7 in the fourth. These were garbage time points for the fantasy fans that the Raiders notched up. This was not a good performance at all from them, particularly following up a really impressive, plucky win on the road against the Ravens the week before. And I don't think this is an overly hot take, but even after last week, my point of view is that Antonio Pierce, who as an ex-Giants Super Bowl winner, I think really highly of. I think he is a great coach, but I think he's firmly on the hot seat. I think he will probably be the first coach to be sacked before the end of the season. And to be honest, he's already a job.
Hold on a minute here, Gav. You're not one of the people that are rushing in to say that the Niners are going to make a coaching change because they can't get it. I mean, we'll get to that in a bit here. But, I think you're maybe right. It's a shame because, like, Antonio Pierce, like, we all saw him in Receivers in the Netflix special or series, I should say, and he comes across so well. And then you saw all the guys in the postseason there, like Crosby and the like stepping up, saying, like, you know what, I will only stay here if you keep Pierce as the head coach, and Devontae Adams is saying, no, this is the guy we want in here. We need him leading the room, kind of thing. But it's one of those things where I look at it and go, is it just, he's not been a head coach before? It's that lack of, it's no shame on him. He's a good defensive coach and everything, but is it just lack of experience for this kind of a role?
It's maybe partly that, but I guess one of the reasons that I think he's gone is not even to do with anything that he's done. It'll be a product of his environment. The Raiders are a franchise that's well known for not having the best track record in the decisions that they make. Even in recent years, they've probably failed to meet expectations. Working with Davis as the team owner. As I say, I think that's one of the things that just leads me to think that Pearce is probably going to be made to carry the can for problems that are a bit more widespread than just him. So as I say, I think he's already kind of in the early stages of interviewing for his next job. I've heard on other podcasts say that one of the key things for him is how he responds. And I think yesterday he called out that the team get their asses kicked. And I think he's right to do that. But how he manages his demeanour over the coming weeks, no matter whether the Raiders are winning or losing, is going to be key, because there is a good coach there. I don't know if it's a head coach rather than a defensive coordinator, but how he conducts himself through the rest of the season will be key to, I guess, what his next role is likely to be.
I think on that point of the press conference, what I kind of took away from it was his point about the quotation marks business decisions that some players were taking. And people have kind of took to, I don't know if you've seen on X or not, but some fans have kind of took to highlighting some of the plays, and Jack Jones seems to be one of the people who may be targeted on that for kind of backing out of a tackle until there was like 5 or 6 other Raiders already in that tackle, and then he goes in. And that's a guy that I think Antonio Pearce knows well from his days at the Patriots, and I think he even coached him when he was in high school. So when you're starting to question your players' business decisions and try to avoid injuries and stuff like that, then it's going to go one of two ways. You're either going to get them to play a bit harder for you, or you're going to start to lose sections of that dressing room.
Well, I mean, it's going from one, or just talking about defensive coaches and going to defensive stalwarts, we move on to the Ravens versus the Cowboys. Now, this is another one, Gav, where the scoreline is maybe a little more flattering to the losing team than it should have been, because they finished 28-25 to the Ravens, but 19 of those Cowboys points came in the fourth quarter, and the Ravens had already scored their 28. Should the Cowboys fans be starting to get worried, Gav?
Given the division, given the division, not yet. I guess it's a tight bunch, but having said that, it's the manner of these losses that's probably the most concerning things. It wasn't a narrow loss to the Saints; they got stomped. And like you said, same idea with the Ravens. Yeah, they might have finished 3 points down, but I mean, that's really a game that had gotten away from them. They made it look close, but I don't think anybody really thought that they were going to complete the comeback. So I think it's going to be an interesting one on the Thursday night football against the Giants. There's part of me that thinks we should be licking our chops coming up against a Cowboys team that's getting absolutely gashed. I guess probably we don't have a dominant running game in the same way that we've seen with the Ravens and Derrick Henry, or the Saints and Kamara. Singletary's good, but he's maybe not racking up these big three-figure tallies in his games. But I think if you're right, there's the alarm bells are definitely starting to flash if you're the Cowboys. But that's to take nothing away from the Ravens in this one. They came out firing.
For sure, studs, like one of the kind of oldest saying or most well-known sayings in football is you win the game at the lines of scrimmage, on both sides. And when I'm looking at this, it's you see, obviously, Gav, you just mentioned there Derrick Henry put up 151 yards, whatever there. But when I look at the Ravens rushing, so you had Derrick Henry averages 6.04 yards per carry. Lamar, 14 carries, 87 yards, average 6.214. Justice Hill, 5 carries, 33 yards, averages 6.6. And then the Cowboys on the other side had a total, a total amount of rushing from them that was only 51 yards. So to me, I look at that, and without even watching the game, I go, wow, so you can't stop the run, but you also can't get it going either, kind of thing. I think Rico Dowdle, even he's averaging, he was the best in the team, he averaged 4 yards a carry, kind of thing. So, you know, what do you think of their kind of trench work, and where do they go from here? And is that why Parsons was sitting on the bench, just like that open arm spread, and you could tell that if anyone went anywhere near him from his own team, he was going to murder them. But he looked not happy. I think you're on mute, Scud. Stud. I just called you Scud as well, but you're on mute.
Sorry, I think it's. I definitely think it's the teething problems for the Mike Zimmer defence coming in and the change. And I kind of touched on this in the preview crew as well. The loss of Dan Quinn is probably been slightly understated for the Cowboys, and I think you're seeing that come to fruition now. And how good a job he did with that Cowboys defence over the past 2-3 seasons that he was with them. Mike Zimmer's defence seems to just not want to protect against the run. For whatever reason. We've seen it the last 2 weeks, and again, it's Micah Parsons. I think there was one of the highlights where I think it was one of Lamar's rushes. Parsons thinks he hands it off to Derrick Henry, and Parsons is going the completely wrong direction. It just leaves a wide open gap for Lamar to go. And we've seen Parsons over the past couple of years. He's been in the league. He's a far better player than that. He's a far more intelligent player than that. He's the one that should be driving that defence going forward, and you've seen him trying to I don't know whether he was trying to rally the troops or whether he was having a go at Lawrence on the bench, where they were there seems to be a bit of dissension, and it's filtering into the offence as well. You've seen CD Lamb and Dak having a go at each other as well, and again, CD was remarkably quiet even in the Cowboys down games. CD's normally still extremely productive, but he was just non-existent. I mean, they lost a fumble kind of early doors, which was a great play by the Ravens defence, punching that one out, and he just never seemed to recover for that.
It's funny, it shows you how good CD Lamb is when you can say he was like non-existent. I think I just saw it, because I was surprised by this as well, and I realised there was the long reception, that's what added to it. He still put up 67 yards.
Yep.
We're all like, he's non-existent, he's not there, but like, yeah, you're right. Like, for CD Lamb, we expect like 90 plus easily.
Yeah. You expect a touchdown and at least nearly 100 yards. Do you know what I mean?
30 fantasy points, CD. Like, what is this? But yeah, no, it's obviously Ravens get the win there, and they've been looking for it, kind of thing. They've came close a couple of times, came close in the first game against yourselves, but obviously lost in the end. And last week happened, and this week they've managed to beat the Cowboys. But that was a bigger win than what the scoreline suggests. I would say so. The Cowboys, as much as they got to within 3 points, that's not really what happened there. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm looking long and hard at that team right now and going, what do we need to do to get everybody on the same page? Now, moving on.
Just before you move on, so just one last point on the Ravens. I think the Ravens are still showing their deficiencies, though. As much as we're saying a lot of the Cowboys' points were in the fourth quarter, that's exactly the Ravens' problem. They're trying their best to find ways to lose games. I mean, the Cowboys recovered an onside kick, which went right through Zay Flowers' arms. So, yeah, the Ravens really have an issue closing games out, and there was probably an element of fortune, the fact that they did walk away from Dallas with a win as well. As much as, they racked up those points the first 3 quarters, they still almost lost it as well. So I think the Ravens are still firmly under the microscope in the AFC North as well.
I think that's a fair point. But moving on to our next game, Niners versus the Rams, divisional battle, and it ends Niners 24, Rams 27. Sophie, and looking at the stats for this game, Gav, like, it's interesting because, like, Niners time of possession 33.45, and I want to point out that I need to go back and run through all the games, but what I have noticed as we've talked about them, I think every single one so far up until this one, the team that had the ball, the possession, most won. And that kind of seemed to be tracking all the way through until you hit this one. And you see total yards, 425, first downs, 25, passing yards, 288, rushing yards, 137. The Rams on the other side, 19 first downs, 296 total yards, so like 130 odd less. So 100 less passing and about 40 less rushing yards. They had more penalties. And yet, somehow, the Rams come out with a win. You want to talk us through what the Rams were doing right and how they managed to be so efficient with what they had?
So I think there's a mixture of things going into this game. Again, I keep coming back to this point. Rams, a team going into the week 0-2, and perhaps some would have said either the most dangerous 0-2 team or the unluckiest 0-2 team. Either way, what you put it down to, this is a side that needed a win. However, I kind of talked earlier about the Texans didn't need to worry after losing in Minnesota. The 49ers might have done the same thing last week, but what really worries me is the manner of this defeat. It was only by 3 points on the road, but they had multiple 14-point leads in this game. And yet, Studs, I mean, you said the Ravens couldn't close it out. The 49ers really didn't do it here. And early in the season, sure, but the way that they let this one slip as a good team that should know what they're doing, that worries me. And I think, 49ers have a big travelling support. Early on, you could hear the noise in SoFi coming from the visiting fans. As the game went on, that momentum swung. And if you're meant to be a perennial Super Bowl contender, that's a game you've got to close out.
No, for sure, it's interesting because again, even just looking at the stats for it, it's like Brock Purdy, he played extremely well. Studs, you're looking at the QBR of 148.31, 292 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception, and he had one near the end that I think it was Jennings he went for. Jennings had a hell of a game. Well, we need to say that. For one thing, 175 yards on 11 receptions. When you consider you've also got Ayuk there, 48 yards with 5 receptions, but he's missing Kittle, he's missing Debo. Obviously, McCaffrey's been gone, but Jordan Mason's still done a pretty damn good job, kind of thing, all things considered, heading forward. But what do you make of the Niners, and what do they need to do to kind of get more wins besides have people be healthy?
Yeah, it's a weird one because you look at the stats, and the Niners didn't do a lot wrong. They had 1 turnover. It was a Brock Purdy fumble. But other than that, as you say, Juwan Jennings was just unplayable. I mean, he had 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. In fact, he had all of the 49ers touchdowns. And we were talking about their defense as being one of these defenses that was Fred Warner in particular had been playing out of his mind so far this season. It just seemed like a really, really strange game. As I say, the 49ers going 14-0 up, you thought, right, this is just going to be an absolute whitewash. They never really seemed to close that door on the Rams, and then the Rams got their touchdown, and then they started to just build that little bit of momentum. And the big turning point was the punt return by Xavier Smith that he returned for 38 yards, where he almost got away at the end to take it to the house. So that was a massive turning point. And yeah, it just seemed like a really, really strange game. And I think if you were to speak to Eric, who was on the preview crew, he'd probably say that the 49ers kind of probably threw this one away rather than the Rams winning it. And it'd be hard to kind of disagree with that sentiment.
Yeah, no, I would say that's fair. Now, going from that game, both quarterbacks were actually fantastic in that one. Now we move on to the Lions versus the Cardinals. In this one, ends 2013 to the Rams, and Goff's kind of had a bit of a down year so far. Shall we say? Kyler Murray has had a fantastic start to the year so far, but in this game, when you look at the raw stats, Murray's QBR 81.62. He had a touchdown in the interception. Goff 2 TDs, but he threw an interception again, but he did end up with QBR 123. So he's definitely starting to trend in the right direction again. But Studs, what was your thoughts on both the Lions kind of quarterback and the Cardinals with Mr. Murray there?
I've actually seen what you're doing when you've went down this list. You've saved the last 2 games for the refereeing controversies that kind of encapsulated the 2 games, to be honest. But I'm sure we'll touch on the refereeing controversy in this one. But yeah, I think Goff was probably a lot of people's a good outside pick for an MVP candidate based on the fact that he seems to love playing in a dome. Doesn't seem to have any trouble with that. And I think most of these games this year, if not all of them, are actually in a dome, which is obviously favouring that aspect of it. The weapons he's got are unbelievable. Jameson Williams started the season like an absolute house on fire as well, just adding to those weapons. So everything was certainly trending up for the Lions. I think their loss last week, Dan Campbell seemed to take a lot of flack for him. He took a lot of ownership for it as well. So rather than put it on the players, so the Lions seem to be moving in the right direction. I think the fact that they've kind of eked out a tough win in this one is only probably going to benefit them going forward for the confidence levels. David Montgomery kind of finally turned up. He'd realised that the season didn't start 2 weeks ago. It apparently started in week 3 for him. So he had an absolute monster game. And even that as well, you look at Jahmyr Gibbs in that side of it, they really seem to kind of go with the hot hand. Whoever's had a good rush, they'll stay in for the set of plays at the Lions. And
totally. Gibbs was 83 yards on 16 attempts. Monty was 105 on 23. So Gibbs was like slightly more efficient, but like both of them, if you're over 4.5 yards per carry, like you may as well just run the ball every time. You don't even need to pass it, really.
That was it. You look at Goff this week, 23 attempts as opposed to last week where he was over 50 when they got absolutely smashed off the Bucks. So they leaned on what they were doing last year, which was having 2 excellent running backs and really utilising their skill sets and asking Goff to do less. So for that perspective, I think we probably knew that after week 2. We knew the Lions would be fine after that Bucks result, and I think you're probably going to see them hit a wee run now, hit a wee purple patch where they go on a wee winning streak, and really maybe kind of separate themselves from the rest of the NFC North.
Yep. No, I guess Gav, going to you here. So Kyler Murray, obviously the loss, but the Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison connection looks to be continuing to grow, I should say. Like after a very quiet week 1, you know what? That's 2 weeks in a row now with touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they really are starting to find their stride as a connection, and I think as much as I don't really see the Cardinals as a post-season team, I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. And I think we're definitely going to get Scott Hansen with lots of cutaways to Arizona or wherever they happen to be playing that week, just to show the key highlights. Because it's a really exciting bunch. And Harrison Jr., obviously, we know the story there. He was the first receiver drafted in what was a strong class this year as well. So they're going to do really well. At least I think statistically, certainly, and I think for the fantasy fans, they'll be quite happy if they've got either or. I do want to come back to the Lions though, because I think Stud's kind of touched on it. I've been banging on through this pod tonight about teams that need to worry or don't need to worry. The Lions, I think. My big reflection going back to last season is this is a team that's still truly learning to win. They struggled to close out that conference championship against the Niners, and it reminds me a lot of the Seahawks 10 years before their Super Bowl run. They had a couple of near misses in the playoffs. So for me, the Lions, they're not dominating anybody, but the Lions of old would have lost in week 1 against the Rams. The Lions of old would not have been close against the Bucks in week 2. And similarly, they might have thrown this one away as well. So the fact that they're winning close games, that doesn't concern me. I think actually that's a strength, that you are not playing at your best. And that might be a theme that Studs will touch on in a minute. In the next game, they're not playing at their best. They're still winning, or they're putting themselves in a position to win.
No, that's an excellent point. Refereeing issues, as you just mentioned, Studs. Let's get into it here, and then we're going to go to the last game. We're going to talk about the Chiefs, but refereeing decisions. So you're the referee, so let's give you a tape.
Yeah, I actually seen it this morning on Twitter on the 2 minute warning. where just before it, Goff seems to have snapped the ball just before it hits that 2-minute warning, and he throws a horrible pass. It's picked off by the Cardinals, and the guy's away, and it gets blew up and pulled back, saying the 2-minute warning had hit. For me, again, we've got technology now where you can see that ball is snapped before the 2-minute warning, and the Cardinals should have had another takeaway. So I think the Lions probably got away with one. I think the refs have helped in that element. But yeah, that really shouldn't be happening at this level. I think you can, refs are human, they're going to make mistakes, but surely there's got to be a call down, maybe whether it's from upstairs or whatever, to say, no, wait a minute, guys, that's a good play. Even if they call the play dead after that interception, it still gives Arizona a chance to go up the field in 2 minutes and take the lead. Whether they win it or not, it's a different story. But yeah, that's surely there's got to be some help there to say, no, wait a minute, guys, you've got that one wrong. That ball was snapped pre-2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I would say, I mean, that's definitely it. Is like, to me, I've seen that kind of happen a couple of times where like something will happen, they blow it dead, but surely when you review it, you could just say like, okay, well, we'll just like start with the ball from where it ended. It sucks because who knows, maybe could have took it to the house.
Yeah,
I think it's a sportsmanship thing, though. I think with I mean, I've seen it at amateur levels. It's the inadvertent whistle, and if you're a player, it sucks if you're the victim of that. Referees are like anyone; they will make mistakes, and unfortunately, with something like that, it's very difficult to say, how a play would have turned out if the players on either side of the ball hadn't heard that whistle. So you're right. If I'm a victim of a call like that, I'm massively frustrated. But I think that's going to be a really difficult one to pull out unless you go to, I don't know, a siren or an air horn that's centralised for the 2 minutes.
I think there was an incident in the Miami Seahawks game as well where Skylar Thompson was looking for his receivers to throw to, and the whistle had kind of went, but they let the play kind of go almost, and Thompson ended up having to just kind of throw it in the dirt. And you've seen Mike McDaniels absolutely lose his mind over it. So there were certainly a couple of ones with the inadvertent whistles, as you called it, Gav. So there were a couple of instances on it. As I say, for me, one.
I get that it's not, it definitely happens, and of course mistakes can be made and all that, but just that one, it just seemed so harsh because of the situation. But anyway, moving on to another game where everybody was talking about the refereeing decision, which, to be honest, I was like, it's a shame that that's the way it ended up coming down to it, because before all that happened, I was thoroughly enjoying watching that game of football. Like, I thought it was an excellent Sunday night football game from both teams, to be honest. Like, there was especially the Chiefs' defence played well. But anyway, it's the Chiefs and the Falcons. The final score was 22-17 to the Chiefs over the Falcons in an absolutely amazing stadium that they have out there in Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz. But anyway, Studs, I'll let you have your moment to talk about all the good points before we get into bamming you up about the referees being on your side.
Yeah, no, I think it was certainly the Falcons absolutely come out flying in this one, to be honest. They scored a touchdown their first drive. Kirk Cousins looked like the Kirk Cousins that we all know and love, or love to hate, whatever way you kind of look at it. But he took them down the field on that first drive and got them the touchdown straight away. And then Mahomes marches up the field, and it looks like this is going to just be a back and forth, and throws a pick in the end zone, which, when I was watching it, I was sitting scratching my head thinking, what have you actually seen there? Because it was all probably very similar to the Mayfield one with Mike Evans. It was a pass into double coverage for Xavier Worthy, I think it was, and it just didn't seem like it was on. But from there, the Chiefs, you mentioned the defence, the Chiefs' defence really stepped up from that point, didn't allow much for Atlanta. They really nullified Bijan Robinson for me, which I thought was excellent. Nick Bolton, who we're going to speak about ad nauseum probably in this game, he was just floating around the back of that line of scrimmage whenever he sensed it was a run. He really is the leader of that defence. And he was floating around the back and just absolutely sealing off on that front. Bijan seems to prefer the outside runs, which the Chiefs absolutely closed down for him. So Robinson outside probably the first drive didn't seem as if he had that efficient a game. And again, that was a credit to Spags in the defence in that front. But as I said, Nick Bolton was just unbelievable last night.
Actually, Studs received a message there on the side from a listener saying Bolton is unreal. So you know, there's more.
It was literally. I mean, he got banged up as well in the fourth quarter. Had to go off. I see he was holding his back. I think it was, if I remember right. And but then he missed like 2 plays and come back in, and then he made the game winning tackle on Bijan Robinson at 4th and inches just to kind of finalise the game as well for that perspective. But he was just absolutely on a mission last night to take over that game and really kind of highlight how good a player he is. From our offensive side, obviously we missed Pacheco, which he's going to be a massive loss. But Carson Steele looked good when he was rushing the ball, so I was quite impressed with him.
The footage from the wedding looked good. It looked like everybody was clearly
that was hilarious. The fact that it was meant to be a groomsman at his sister's wedding, but he was in Atlanta for the game. And then Rashee Rice was just, he was for the probably second and third quarters, he was just unstoppable. Probably doing him a disservice actually, because the first drive in the first quarter as well, he was excellent.
Just before I'm going to flip over to Gav a question here, but just before I do that, speaking of targets, because obviously Rashee Rice is kind of emerging as sort of the guy in Kansas City. Travis Kelce, like, what's going on there? Because there's a few things I saw him last night where he was screaming wide open. The ball's not going to him. Like, what do you make of that? Because I've heard that a few people have some very hot takes on it that I don't really subscribe to conspiracy theories. But, you know, what do you think's going on there, Studs?
For me, again, he's doing the role that he needs to do to help the team win. I think he's very much, if you listen to him on his podcast, you listen to him talking, he's very team orientated. Him and Mahomes have got a great relationship. We all know that. They spend a lot of time together and stuff like that. So for me, I'm not too worried, because you look at last season as well, which was probably one of his worst statistical regular seasons, but then he turns up in the postseason. So if I'm going to get a season, and again I've picked him up in a couple of fantasy teams this year, and as frustrating as it will be in the regular season, I'd rather have him playing in the postseason and playing lights out like he did last year and leading us to a Super Bowl. So I'm not overly worried about it. Yeah, there were a few times where he was open, but again, as long as we're moving the ball, I don't think he's going to be too disheartened if he's wide open and not getting the ball. If Rashee Rice is getting the ball and we're still moving the chains, so I'm not buying into any conspiracy theories on it.
Okay, so moving to Gav now. Speaking of conspiracy theories, we're just going to cut right to it because we may as well, because we're kind of getting a bit short on time here. So I want to get this in. The end of the game, Chiefs are up, kind of thing. So I think it was, they were up by 5 points at the end, and Falcons are moving the ball down the field fairly well and all that. Like, occasional questionable play call aside, but sometimes we see that from the Falcons. They don't always do what you think they should do, and that's fine. That can be, it works both ways. It confuses defenses too. But anyway, they end up in a situation where Cousins is there and he has the chance and he takes the shot, puts the ball right on his receiver, who I should remember exactly who it is.
Kyle Pitts.
Who I have on a couple of fantasy teams, and I'm thinking, great, he's finally having a good game. And he did have a good game, but puts the ball right on him. But of course, he's been tackled long before the ball even arrives. Gav, what do you make of that incident?
Well, we've been going after the Chiefs all season long as the baddies, and I think we're really going to have to turn to wrestling now, because this is the biggest screw job since Montreal. I'm starting to wonder if the Chiefs just start bringing their own special guest referees to the matches.
That's like, just not perfect.
They get the call in the pass interference last week. They get a no call in the pass interference this week. It's funny that you find ways to win, and the refs always factor in it. You know what I mean? I'll be honest. Late game, I didn't see it, but objectively, I think everyone does agree this was a missed call. However, it's on third down, I think 3rd and 5 from the 6-yard line. They still had fourth down.
Yeah.
They didn't make it in fourth down.
No.
They stopped they benefited from the field position. They kept they forced the 3 and out, and the Chiefs, they got the ball back. They had another chance. They didn't do anything
Still
with
couldn't
it.
do it. Yeah. Then there was some weird. That was the thing I was alluding to, was they got the ball back, and I know Studs is going to know about the make-up call, and but whatever. I think that was pass interference as well, though. So screw you, because he was doing it all week last week as well. So
what I'm going to throw out here as well was, let's kind of look at the circumstances. So the Falcons, they didn't get the touchdown, and obviously, of course, they're thinking, yes, we should get the touchdown. However, by stalling at the 6-yard line, they still benefited from the field position. So let's say they get the touchdown, they're up by 1, they probably go for 2. So either they're up by 1 or they're up by 3. But Mahomes doesn't take over at the 6-yard line. He's probably taken over about the 30. There's still 4 minutes left in the game. So there's still a whole lot of football left to be played. And yeah, it's a bad call. And there's no getting away from that. However, I'm really at the point where it's very difficult to come away from a game and just blame the referee for one play, because if you pin your wins and losses on what the refs do, then you're never going to be successful as a team. So I think the Falcons have, they obviously had a big win the previous week. They pushed the Chiefs hard, but like I said, some teams, you've just got to learn how to win the big one, and that's the difference between what we're seeing as a fairly stacked team, but they're coming up against they are coming up against the dynasty right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, as I would say on it as well, is I've loved, or I mentioned earlier about the time of possession thing. Chiefs had the ball for nearly 35 minutes, Falcons for 25. So again, when it comes down to it, what that shows to me is, like, even if they are moving, fairly slowly up the field for what we expect with the Chiefs, especially with Worthy and those faster players that they have now, they were just moving the ball better. And in the end, if the Chiefs are going to do that against you, even if Mahomes, even he's saying, he's like, I've not started the year very well at all, kind of thing, and he's admitting it, then, if you can't kind of move the ball better against them, then you're not going to win, no matter what you do. But yeah, that was a missed call, but I agree with you, Gav. Like, there still would have been so much time on the clock that we don't know. We're in fantasy land at that point, but I still want to call them cheats and baddies. So that's it. And Brian will praise me for that, because we all know how he feels.
Yeah, it was quite a blatant missed PI on Pitts, but I'm very much the one for me. I felt the refs did do a make-up call personally with the Trent McDuffie one, because I think Ray McLeod actually runs into McDuffie. I don't think McDuffie does anything. And then the ref flew the flag through the flag.
Wasn't really it wasn't like he moved sideways to block him. I mean, he did. He just rolled right into him. And so, some of that one, if you're the the attacking player, you can't just. I mean, unless you're Derrick Henry and you want to just
run through him.
Maybe if he face masked him, it would have been, although he didn't have the ball yet, but still. But anyway, on that note, we'll leave it there, kind of thing. We've kind of come to the end of this tonight. I was going to do a statistic of the week, but we've hit an hour and a half, so I think if we just kind of cut it short, so we won't do any sort of kind of quiz or anything, but I think we should just point out that Andy Dalton has went like 2 games in a row with 300 yards, more than 300 yards passing, multiple touchdowns, no interceptions, and he's done it separate season. What a guy.
So the Ace Rimmer reference.
Andy Dalton wins. That's what a guy. But no, that's us. We've been the review crew. Thanks so much for coming along and joining us on this journey through all things week 3. We'll see what happens tonight. Maybe my Bengals will win and I can be happy, or we'll lose and I'll be start to think we're only 3 and it's time to burn it all down and start again. And then the other game we've got is the Jags versus the Bills. I think so.
Jags at the Bills. Yep.
Double header Monday night.
Yep, should be fun, and that'll be starting in just a couple of hours here. So Crew will get you through for another 2 hours. Anyway, that's That's all, folks. Thanks a lot and have a good night.